All right. Hello, everyone. Nothing like a little Canadian men's national team transfer news live stream today. You wasn't really expecting to do this, so we're just throwing it together a little last second. But I mean, Alex is here, shirt half undone, exactly the way I like to look at him, and I'm excited just to talk a little Tajon. So, Alex, I mean, how you doing today? Appreciate you coming on as always.
Yeah, no, it's a good start to the day. Interesting bit of news out of Tajon Buchanan's camp. Good start to this Thursday. Jesse Fleming starting in Chelsea's must-win semifinal against Barcelona. Lots going on from a Canadian perspective.
Absolutely, and get your guys' thoughts in the comments. We'll probably go over, I'd say, our thoughts. Obviously, I mean, these interlinks aren't brand new, but we'll go over where we think he's going to potentially fit in with this squad. Will Inzaghi be there? We got a few different talking points, but just all in all, this is. I mean, I don't really remember if Fabrizio actually name dropped Inter before. I know that there's been a ton of interest around Buchanan. We've heard recently, I think last week, that Inter, Lazio, a few clubs like that were looking after him. But Fabrizio came out today and said that the player's obviously close. We've heard the terms verbally agreed. 15 million euros is going around. So, I mean, Alex, just how big of a move would this be for a player like Buchanan? And I want to be careful how I phrase this question, but do you think he's earned this type of move? Because I'm seeing a lot on Twitter. A lot of people are saying, he did so well breaking into the Canadian national team. He did well in Major League Soccer. He hasn't quite taken that step. I'm seeing a lot of, I don't know if I personally agree with it, but he hasn't quite taken that step at Club Brugge. A ton of different managers he's played under. He played at left back, right back, wing backs, winger. He's been all over the place. So do you think that he's had a stable enough time in Europe so far to justify this move to Inter, or what are your thoughts?
I think he's made enough for this type of move, and I think I just say that because you look at what's like in the works here. Like, it's not like Inter is out here throwing 30 million at Tajon Buchanan and being like, look, go be the star of our attack or something like that. I think you look at the fact that they're looking at this and making a $5 to $10 million transfer, because those are kind of been the figures being thrown around. This strikes me a lot as a move that's like, okay, we have a need to fill because Denzel Dumfries is heading somewhere, be it United, be it, he's been at the club for a while. He's a great wing back. We have this huge hole we want to fill. Let's not fill it by, sell Dumfries for say 30, 40, whatever he's worth. We don't want to fill it with another 20, 30, 40 million dollar player. This is them maybe taking a chance on someone who, in Buchanan, who at his best so far at Bruges has shown that he can play at a higher level. He can play in a top 5 league. We've seen that. We've seen that in the Champions League where he was going up against Atletico Madrid, all these clubs and looking great. But also a guy who, consistency's just not always been there from him, from the manager standpoint. There's been, especially, under Scott Parker, say where he wasn't getting those offensive looks as much. So them looking at that, like, okay, we like what we've seen at the best of the potential. Let's make a $5 to $10 million, not punt, because I feel like it's not, that would be disingenuous to call it a punt. It's definitely a very, smart and shrewd assessment. But I think this is one where Inter's looking more to the future. And I think when you look at Buchanan, it makes sense. He's still someone that's very young. He's had his taste. We've seen it, but he'll want more. And I think a move like this could push him to that next level.
And just for anyone who doesn't know where these rumors kind of originally came from, Inter is under a little bit of a financial constraint right now. They need to shed and make some money and bring in proper replacements. We've seen this in the past, and Alex helped me maybe think of who they were. But after they won the title, I believe they got rid of Hakimi and replaced him with Dumfries. And there's 2 or 3 other players. They got rid of a midfielder. I think they brought in Çalhanoğlu, and they got rid of Lukaku and
they sold Lukaku for a lot of money
and brought in Edin Dzeko. So they have done this in the past where they have shedded players who are, assets who should be able to sell. So that's what Dumfries is to them. That's what Hakimi was. That's what Lukaku was. And then they brought in cheaper alternatives to just help with their financial situation. So that's where, after the successful World Cup that Denzel Dumfries had, that's where those rumors kind of came around. Premier League clubs interested in Denzel Dumfries. I think the number was close to 40 mil. And then you strategically go out there and find somebody who they think can do a job for a cheaper budget. And, you shed 40 million on Denzel Dumfries, you bring in 15 million Tajon Buchanan. It works. But looking at this, and I'll have two different questions, and we'll get in the chat as well, guys. Let me know on a scale of 1 to 10 in the chat how good of a fit you think this is. So I will answer first on behalf of OneSoccer. So Alex, hopefully you agree. I'm going to say it's a 9 out of 10 for a few different reasons. Now, I know a lot of Canadians out there love seeing what Tajon brings on the attacking sense, and don't get me wrong, I do as well. But I think just the attributes that make Tajon what he is, I think he could really thrive in a wingback role. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd rather see him as a winger as opposed to a flat 4 right back. But I think in terms of a wingback coming into this intern system, which I will bring up a recent the match against Juventus just to kind of show you how they line up. Now, it doesn't mean that Inzaghi will be there next season, and that's kind of where I'm going with that, Alex. So do you agree with me in terms of if he was his replacement right there? I don't know if you guys can see my arrow. To replace Denzel Dumfries in this type of system, in a 3-5-2, do you think that would be the perfect role for him in this side? And also, do you believe that Inzaghi will be here next season? Because there has been a lot of rumors that are linking him out the door, so we don't know what type of manager will come in, what system that they will implement. So give me your thoughts there.
I mean, a lot to answer there.
I know. Sorry about that.
I feel like he should be back. I think it's something where, look, the league, they're in 6th. It's not the greatest year for them in that regard. I guess they'd be up to 5th, depending on what happens with the Juventus situation. But at the same time, Napoli's just kind of run dominant over everyone. And then it's kind of been a dogfight after that. Like Lazio, Juve, Milan, Roma, at Atlanta, Inter, all within 9 points of each other. Like that's a very competitive top 6 the last few years, especially because AC's figured their stuff out. Atalanta's always around. Juventus is, we know what Juventus is capable of. Napoli has stepped up. Like Serie A, the top end of Serie A has become very, very competitive after that post-Juve just dominant. So I think it's something where you look at league form. They have 7 games left. For all we know, they climb their way up in the top 4. They're fine. Then you look at Champions League. They're in the semifinals. That's a huge accomplishment for, a team like, Inter, especially look at the state of their squad and what they've invested in. I think that's a huge achievement that's going to only help them put more money into their squad for next year. You look at, they also beat Juventus last night in the Coppa Italia semifinals. So they're in a Coppa Italia, final. They could be in a Champions League final. Like I think overall, that's a pretty darn good year for what's considered a down year, and you add in all the financial troubles as well. I think it's something where you look at Inzaghi, you wonder what he could do if you gave him a bit more investment in his squad. So I think he'd probably stick around. And either way, I think the 3-5-2 is probably there to stay for Inter. You look at a lot of their pieces, they've been kind of building it for good 4, 5, 6 years, even when Antonio Conte was there and everyone else. They kind of suit a 3-5-2. So I think that would just leave a natural wingback spot for a guy like Buchanan to come in. I think that's for the last question, like, would he fit? I think that it's a perfect fit, just the way that Inter play with their wingbacks, Dumfries in particular. If you watch him play, he gets this license to go forward and is always in the final third, which I think is what you want from Buchanan. He's a natural winger at heart. You want him running at guys. You want him getting in the final third. But then Dumfries would have to do a lot of off-ball running, which I think is something that we'd love to see Buchanan improve, that side of his game where he's making those runs, making those overlaps, getting involved. And then Buchanan's improved his defensive game a lot. And I think he'd have to be asked to fend a fair bit in this 3-5-2. And I think that's also something where it allows him to use those skills without, managers being too comfortable and putting him in a right back position where it kind of stifles some of that speed, some of that offense, some of that 1v1 dribbling he has. So I think a wingback role gets the most out of it, but you still get to see him in the final third, which is, I think, what we ultimately want.
I like a few of your points there. One, I do agree. I mean, Antonio Conte, who was there, played this system. That's why Inzaghi was a natural replacement, came in to continue it. I don't think that they will go, even if Inzaghi isn't here next season, which I know that there were rumors of him getting sacked, but all of a sudden he's in like you said, the Champions League semifinal. He's in a Coppa Italia. Yes, he may not he might win the Champions League, which will get him Champions League qualification next year. Doesn't even need to do it through the season. But regardless, look at the history of successful right wing backs. João Cancelo to Hakimi to Dumfries. This is a home where I think that Tajon Buchanan could really take a big step. Not only we know what he can do going forward, and I think, not to be harsh on Tajon, but I think he is proven in the Belgian league that maybe like this wingback role is perfectly suited for him. Like I love a lot what he can do 1v1. His pace is incredible. He reads the ball very well. I don't think that final product is quite there yet for Buchanan. I think he can get himself into some good space. And I think if he's able to do that from a right wing back position in a team like Inter, and he feeds forward someone like Lukaku if he's there, Lautaro Martinez, I think that's where you're going to find the best out of Buchanan. And I think also playing in Serie A, yes, it's not the complete defensive league it used to be, but I think that his defensive game will definitely improve joining a club like this and just growing his game. And going on this point right here, I just hope that he gets enough time. I don't want to see him warm the bench. And I think that's what I personally like about this move is, as Canadians know, these type of transfers, these big clubs don't always go the right way. We see what happened to Richie. Obviously, Eustachio, for about 6 months, we were concerned, and all of a sudden, he found his feet. I truthfully believe that, and if you've seen it in the past with when they replaced Cancelo with Hakimi and then Hakimi with Dumfries, that this is an opening, and it's just up to Tajon to maybe step his game up and take that position on. Because I'm not overly worried. I don't know, Alex, should I be? I'm not overly worried about him replacing Dumfries and then maybe a Darmian ends up, getting ahead of Buchanan. He finds himself on the bench. I truthfully believe if this type of move happens, that Buchanan would be a starter.
Yeah, and I mean, I think so too. I think it's something where you look at the investment, the fact that he's being lined up straight up as a Dumfries replacement. The nice thing is, at the very least, Inter has a lot to juggle typically because, unless bearing something completely unforeseen, they should be in Europe next year. It could be as low as Conference League. It could be as high as Champions League, but it seems like they should end up in Europe. They have, cup commitments, Serie A. It's something where they'll at least need rotation. And I think, again, though, looking at the fact that he's a Dumfries replacement, I think he should slot in. There's a natural fit there. This isn't a matter of him going up against a player and, okay, he has to win that spot. He isn't going to Inter unless Dumfries leaves. And I think that would have been his biggest competition. And from there, he'll also have chances with other rotations. So I think he should play.
I agree. And we're just going to get in the chat, guys. So if you're just joining us, drop a like on the stream, get your opinions in. Would you like to see Buchanan go to Serie A, go to Inter? What are your thoughts there? We got Inter content on OneSoccer. Beating Juventus yesterday was sweet, but this is the cherry on the top if this happens. I think so too. I mean, it's hard to know because a lot of the times with these Inter links, there were different sources. Some were pretty trusted and some were just kind of out there. And these links have not gone away. And they've been pretty consistent for a while now. And then the fact that Fabrizio Romano tweets this out, some other reliable sources as well. This looks like it could happen. And I think that's pretty exciting to have a player like Alphonso Davies playing for Bayern, Jonathan David, who eventually I think Alex and I will touch on a little bit more in this stream, where we think that he will potentially go. And then a player like Tajon Buchanan jumping into not only a top 5 league, but a club like Inter Milan is just absolutely fantastic. Really, really, really hoping that I could see this happening. Daniel said, just tuning in, how much will he play at Inter? Alex, like we kind of just touched on, I don't know. I think he'd be a starter. I truthfully do. I think Alex does as well. There's if you just look at the recent history of successful right wing backs, they come in and they just basically pick up where the last right wing back left off. There's a little uncertainty with Inter. Again, like we mentioned, we don't know the manager who's going to be. We're assuming that this system will fly. But I mean, just to play devil's advocate here, Alex, if a new manager does come in, because I think I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I think I saw Sarri getting linked to a couple of different jobs in Serie A. So let's just say Sarri comes over and takes over Inter Milan. That would clearly mean a switch in shape. He plays a 4-3-3. He took that Lazio side, who was a 3-5-2, and completely turned them into Sarri ball 4-3-3. If that did happen, you would assume that Buchanan would be a winger and not a fullback. Is that correct?
I would think so, just because I think Sarri would probably see him as more of a fullback based on the way he plays. But I just look at Inter; they would need to buy a few wingers, and so assuming Buchanan's there, he would be a lot cheaper than what some of these potential winger options would look like. So I think he would probably be a winger if Sarri were to come in. I mean, I guess you never really know because in Serie A, there's always a bit of rotation amongst the top 6 clubs with coaches. So for all you know, someone who ends up there could also continue playing a 3-5-2. But if it's Sarri, would be an interesting one just because he has a very clear way of playing. And it's fun, but could mean a bit of fullback for Buchanan. But if unless Inter doesn't sign any wingers.
Yeah, I mean, I like this question here, and I think we can get in a little debate because I do see both sides, but I'm not a big fan of moving into prime time until you're a household name. And like I do agree with that. Like you say that the player risks warming the bench and killing their mojo, become a star at Bruges first, in my opinion. So I totally see where you're coming from, but in my opinion, right now, and this is just my opinion, feel free in the chat to disagree. Alex, feel free to disagree as well. But I just think in terms of the situation that Tajon has at Club Bruges, he's had so many different managers and he's played in so many different positions. It's almost difficult, like for Buchanan to become that star man, that household name, just because of the situation he's in. If he walked into that Club Bruges side that was maybe a historic Club Bruges side, doing incredible things, which I mean, they did do incredible things in the Champions League, but you get where I'm going. Under one manager, under one system, Tajon is lighting it up. That's one type of situation. But because of the situation at Club Bruges, where the managers keep coming in and out, the position changes, I think switching it up and going for this type of move is a no-brainer. Or even if it was somebody else, like I mean, Jonathan David is another good example. Like he is doing it like last season, like he's doing it successfully. He probably could have moved last year, but he did take on that other year. But we knew that a good manager was coming in. We knew that he was going to start. I think Tajon's time at Club Bruges has been so all over the place that it's hard for him to maybe become that star at Club Bruges and pass up an opportunity like Inter. I don't know if I articulated that point right, but
look, I'd say there's two sides to this. I think one side, there's the Buchanan at Bruges side, and I think it's something where, of course, you want to keep a player at a club as long as you can, develop, become the guy. I just look at this year, and the big thing for me was he comes back from his big injury where he missed the start of the year, missed the Super Cup, all this. He comes back and he slots right into the Champions League games, looks great, goes to World Cup, looks great, comes back from World Cup. Scott Parker gets hired. They're playing a 4-3-3. Their offense dries up. Yet Buchanan had this stretch of, I think, 5 games where I want to say he had 2 to 3 assists. He forced an own goal, won a penalty. He was basically the shining light in the attack. He kind of gets minutes just fall off the radar for no reason. Next thing you know, there's a new manager. He's playing wing back again. It's one of those where it's just like, you look at a situation like that, you're not sitting there like, ooh, like Bruges was struggling, and then Buchanan, Buchanan was struggling. No, he was doing well at Bruges, and then it just kind of felt like the turmoil that was there enveloped him, enveloped everyone. All of a sudden, they're losing 3-0 to relegation-strapped teams where you're like, a club with Bruges' strategy shouldn't do that. So I think it's something where you just look at all that instability, and again, now all of a sudden it's like 5 managers in the year and a half he's been there. You look at something where like, okay, a move elsewhere could make sense just to hit the reset button a bit. And then on the flip side, what I'd say is, yeah, these moves like this can be early, but it's also like, when is it right? Like, is it 5 years? Is it 1 year? I think the big difference for me with this Buchanan move is that, again, it's not a huge move in the sense that he's not making a 30, 40, $50 million move. I think that's huge because the expectations that comes of being a 5 to 10 million, $15 million move are a lot different than someone who's coming in to be a $50 million player. And that's the difference, say, with JD, where David scored a lot of goals. He's been that guy at Lille for a while. He's played in the Champions League, scored goals. Wherever he's going, it's going to be a 50 million plus transfer. That's huge. Those expectations. But at least Jonathan David's shown that he's going to be equipped to handle those. Buchanan isn't making a move like that. And I think lastly, the big thing that matters with all transfers, there's a fit here. You're not looking at this like, ooh, he's up against it, and then there's that risk that he just doesn't play. He freezes out, and you're like, was it too much too soon? There's a chance for him to go in and play. And at the very least, he played a couple of games at the Champions League level. This is Buchanan. Looked comfortable. It's not that wild to suggest he could look competent at the very least. I'm just setting the bar low. At the very minimum, he should look competent in a system like this. And of course, ideally, you want him to shine. You want him to be the Dumfries replacement and, take another step. But at the very least, he should be competent. And the fact that there's a spot there, these are the sorts of moves you want. If the move's there to present yourself upwards, doesn't matter if you're at a club for 6 months or 7 years. You should always be making moves that look to be a fit. And that was why with David last summer, we wanted him to make the move up, but Lille set a clear price tag. There weren't any clubs that could meet it that fit, that David would fit into. Like, okay, just wait, go score some goals, and then more doors will open up. And look, that's what happened for him.
Yeah, and I definitely want to piggyback off of what you just said and just taking to this comment right here. So it's not that I think Club Bruges is bad, because despite them having a pretty I don't even know how to describe their season. Like, I mean, this is a team that have found so much success. They barely snuck into the Final Four, but they've had a poor season. And like Alex says, that the amount of manager turnover is not quite there. And I think that it's not that he's in a bad setup, because to Tajon's credit, with all those managers coming in and out with new ideas, Tajon has always been a starter in several different positions, but he's always been a starter, which shows a lot of great character in my opinion. But like Alex said, a 15 million move to replace a right wing back, which is something that Milan likes to do. Inter does this all the time. It does take the pressure off. And instead of, like you said, JD going to the Premier League, playing for Arsenal, United, Tottenham, expected to score goals, expected to live up to that 60 million euro price tag. It's very, very different. And I'm just going to see if I can find this quickly, because I do have an example. If I can figure it out, because I listed two players. I don't know if I'll figure it out. I need to go to head to head here, but the three players I talked about was they sold Lukaku for 90 million, because the Inter was still in financial situation. They sold Lukaku for 90 million and got Edin Dzeko for free. Then they sold Hakimi for, I want to say, 60, and then got Dumfries for 15. Like, Inter does this all the time because their financial situations is not so great. And I think it just could be a perfect opportunity for Buchanan to come into a situation like this. Yes, there's pressure going to a club like Inter Milan, but I think the fit is absolutely there, where he could just take his game to another level. And I truthfully like watching him at wingback. And I think we could potentially see him grow in that position. And maybe with Canada playing in this 3-5-2, Alex, maybe it's kind of a perfect move for both ways. You can see Davies and Buchanan occupying the flanks with your beloved midfield three, a back three, and David Larin up front. I mean, I don't know what more we can ask for.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those moves where it helps club and country, right? That's hopefully Bayern can go back to playing more of a wing back system for Davies as well. Then you're getting boom, like all of a sudden Davies and Buchanan getting wing back reps at their clubs. Larin and Jonathan David continue to build chemistry. Guys like Kone, Eustachio all playing big midfield roles for their clubs. You look at the back, and even Derek Cornelius casually has been leading the anchoring the middle of a back three for Malmö. There's a lot of you want that sort of familiarity being built at the club level as well. It helps the national team, and yeah, I think it's something again where I just look at the development of the player. I think someone like Buchanan too. I feel like this role will be good for him in many ways too, like to learn. I think he's someone who has a lot of running in him, but sometimes that running isn't always purposeful or impactful. Like I think something where you're in a wing back position, you have to do a lot of purposeful, impactful, smart running, because you don't want to burn yourself out just running in circles when you have to track back. And I think, again, learning from these sorts of positions will only help him immensely, because he's playing fullback. It's different there. Fullback, you can pick your spots. You can just kind of, if anything, fullback, you're sitting defense first. Oh, I get a chance to run, go. Wingback, you always have to go, but you always have to find a way to come back, and it leads to knowing when to pick your spots. And I'd love the growth that he'd get from a position like this.
Absolutely. I think it's a fit. And like I said, I was on Twitter, and I just like, seeing what everyone else is saying. And I think there is a little disappointment of Canadian fans who want to see Tajon in more of a winger role, just because we know what he can do. I just, like I said, for seeing what he's done at Club Bruges right now, I would say that is evidence to show that a right wing back role for Tajon could be one that he could really become elite in, because there's plenty of wingers out there. It's very, like, the wing back role in modern football has changed, and I think Buchanan has the attributes to be very successful there, and especially in a team like Inter where that opportunity could go there. And I do want to stress too, despite Inter being in sixth place, I mean, sixth place in Serie A is a Europa League position. I mean, even if they do slip to seventh, they could win the Coppa Italia, which again would guarantee a Europa League position. And if they win the Champions League, that guarantees a Champions League position. Plus, they're not out of the hunt. So I would say at the bare minimum, Inter will be playing in the Europa League next year, which is, I mean, fantastic for Buchanan. And then on top of that, the goal would obviously be playing in the Champions League. Armin likes the idea well, where he says Tajon Buchanan needs to be in an environment where top players can help him grow. There's no one better than Henrik Mkhitaryan, who is at once extremely talented, skillful, good looking.
Shout out to the Armenian International. Armin showed some love for his Armenian boys.
I agree. No, it is truthfully exciting. And Inter has also shown in the past couple seasons because of, and I keep bringing up like the financial constraints around this club, but it's not easy to build something successful, tear it down, and then continue to be successful. And I know, like we've said, that they're not doing fantastic in the season, but they're gunning for a Champions League. They're gunning for a Coppa Italia, still in the Champions League place. This team has shown that despite big names going out and maybe a little bit unproven names coming through the door, that there is something special about this team right now with the past couple seasons. And I would expect another decent season next year. Just doesn't matter really who's there, but you got a comment to that. He's a workhorse. Every move he makes is brilliant. Would be huge for Tajon. So now, Alex, you and I just did a video, and we talked about this of if a transfer does happen for the summer. We've heard John Herman speak of this as well. Could it affect Buchanan playing in the upcoming CONCACAF Nations League or Gold Cup? I have some thoughts on this, and I'll throw it over to you. But let's just say like this move can happen and it gets in the way of a player making a transfer. I would bet like if this happens for David Davies, if it's a transfer, Davies is just trying to get healthy, or Buchanan, I would assume that the CONCACAF Nations League is almost a must, that the players will find a way to play in there because it's 2 matches, semis, finals, that's it. And then we can maybe see the Gold Cup off for a player like Buchanan if he's going to try to make this move. Does that, my logic there making a little bit of sense, or what are your thoughts?
I think if he's healthy, I mean, he's at Nations League. I think that's no doubt. I think that's where you gear up again, just because it's going to be best on best, so to speak, at least of who's healthy for that tournament. Gold Cup's going to be interesting for a move like this, just because in the Serie A season would start. It starts a little later. It starts on August 20th. I just Googled. So it's not like he'd have to, it's not like one of those leagues like, say, where you're starting late July. But there's a few factors that could limit this. Unless they win the Champions League and qualify automatically, there's a chance, or they get into a top 4 position and qualify automatically. There's a chance they could be in some sort of qualifiers. Like, say if they hold where they are, if I'm not mistaken, they're kind of in a Europa Conference League qualifying spot, which means playing games as early as July to try and sort that out. And, that would mean an earlier preseason. That would mean having to be there to report, and the Gold Cup would end July 16th. So I think it's one where if this move happens, it depends where Inter ends up. There's just because the Serie A starts later. I mean, I'd still think Inter would start their training camp in July, like most teams. It just means it wouldn't be like they're not reporting like July 5th coming to training camp, and you're like, okay, that's very early. But also, it's going to depend on what they want from the player. Like, are they like going to be like, okay, get some rest. We want you to come into our training camp fresh. Because you have a big role to play. You're going to play a lot of minutes because there's not necessarily a lot of depth at that right wing back position. Because of that, I do think his Gold Cup spot or his participation in the Gold Cup is doubtful, but I don't think it's like a situation where like Jonathan David is moving. Like, okay, I just really don't think you could see him. I think, especially given that, Buchanan has been in and out of the lineup. He had that injury at the start of the year. He could be a decent enough candidate to play the Gold Cup and just, take a couple weeks and then roll right into his first Inter training camp, just with the timing with the league starting later.
And just a little clarification. So, like, I don't know, I'm not sure if you're looking at the live table, but so the sixth place is a guaranteed Europa League spot as long as someone who wins the Coppa Italia is in that top 6. So let's just say if Fiorentina go to the finals against Inter and Inter win, then that's and Inter finish 6th. Then if they win, that's guaranteed Europa. Yeah. But let's just say it was AC Milan, it's still a 6th. But if Fiorentina win, then Fiorentina do take that 6th spot, which would bump Inter down to 7th. So I forgot that the other side of the Coppa Italia is there. So that could be a situation. But even if Inter bump up to 5th, then they're still guaranteed Europa. So it does depend there. But I was thinking in my back of my head, I'm like, is there a chance that they can play Conference League? And there is. So if they finish 6th and lose in the finals against Fiorentina, assuming that Fiorentina goes there, then yes, they could be in the 6th. And like you said, then that point comes there. So good catch there, Alex. I didn't think that there was a way, but let's hope, if Tajon is joining Inter, let's hope Inter wins the Coppa Italia. So we don't got to worry about that. But do we know that Dumfries is for sure moving on from Inter? So, I mean, we don't, but I think we could probably put 2 and 2 together. Every single link I've seen with Buchanan has been correlated to Dumfries leaving. They, like I said in the past, there's been a trend with Inter selling assets who are worth something and replacing them relatively cheap. So when they looked at a successful World Cup, which is obviously a great way to boost a player's stock, that is exactly what Denzel Dumfries did, which is why he's being linked to the Prem. That's where the money is. So the assumption is that if Buchanan is coming in, it's because Dumfries is going out. Inter has to shed some money this summer. Maybe they get creative and do it a different kind of way. I mean, Bastoni is in there. Onana's been linked to a few as well, but I would assume that if Buchanan does come in, it is directly related to Dumfries leaving. But we don't know that, but there has been plenty of reports stating that. So did Buchanan ever play wingback? He does. He plays wingback all the time for Canada, for Club Brugge. He played. I mean, I guess I would say more so at New England. He started and played times at right back, but he was mostly played as a right attacking mid. But I would say probably, I mean, Alex, I don't know if you have different thoughts. I'd say the majority of Tajon's career throughout the clubs he's played in Canada, I'd say he'd probably play the most as a wing back, whether it's left or right. Would you say?
I'd say off the top of my head, I mean, I can double check here. He's played around, at New England, he played like 80% of his time on the wing. But then since he's been at Bruges, on the flip side, it's been around 80% of his time has been at wing back. Yeah. And I think, he's played, looking here, 45 games for Bruges, 67 for New England. And he's played about equivalent at each position based on transfer mark. Then you look at, because they look at what position he's starting in. He's played over 40, 50 games at wing back. He's also played around 30, 40 games on the wing. About give or take, he's done both. You had his time with Canada, of course, into that.
Would you be worried about Buchanan playing wing back for Inter at this level? I know we talked about, he obviously played for Club Brugge in the Champions League and looked very good there. I think he played though in the Champions League as a winger, but just through a 38 match season featuring as a right wing back, knowing that his defensive abilities will need to improve just to keep up with the level. Would you be worried about the defensive side of things, or do you think Tajon has those attributes to be able to step into that position and thrive?
I think I'd be maybe a bit worried off the start, just to see how he adjusts, just because it is a high demands, especially, playing right wing back, you're doing a lot of running. I think as well, like, especially say you're playing in Napoli and they have Variacelia on the left. So it's like you're playing wing back and your job is, okay, run up and provide a source of width, but also like get back, because like Variacelia guy is pretty good and could, torture our defenders if you're not getting back and getting in position. And I think that's going to be a tall ask. I think it's something where it's going to be getting used to not just running, but running purposefully, knowing when to track back, how to stay involved, etc. But again, I think the offensive potential is intriguing, because again, the Inter's wing backs, every time I watch them, they're very involved. Like they're they've always had such aggressive wing backs. They rely on kind of midfielders covering, their center backs playing a little more conservatively in possession. They want their wing backs to just get up the field. Like how many times have I watched Inter games and you're guys like Hakimi, guys like Dumfries, they're expected almost at times to play like not even right wingers, like inside forwards, the way they're supposed to run. Like when the ball's on the left side, the right winger is almost asked to like cut inside the opposing fullback and try to find space at the back post. So I think offensively, there's only upside, just because I think Buchanan can do all those things. We've seen it at, say, New England, where when he was playing right wing, he was such a problem, because he'd pop up inside, he'd pop up outside, he could take you on 1v1, he could shoot, he can, get to the byline and cross. And I think at Inter, he'd be asked to do a lot of those things. Just again, a lot more off the ball running. He'd also have to do, which he'd have to get used to, just making those channel runs, finding the space. I think again, the question is defensively, and I'd be very curious to see how he handles it, because I think he does have a good engine, and he's good in 1v1 for the most part. Like when he gets these 1v1s, he doesn't do anything too rash. He doesn't get burned too often. It's just, can you cope with having all the offensive responsibilities, but also having to defend? And that's where the elite wingbacks get distinguished from the average wingbacks, just because you have the demands of having to be so good at both areas constantly while running.
And I mean, it's a cheeky little quote, but sometimes offense is the best defense. And when you're constantly causing problems like that, like Buchanan, we'd expect him to do, running down the flanks, it just creates issues, and it's hopefully something that we're going to like to see. But the one thing that Buchanan obviously has, and I think that if you're going to be an elite wingback, it's speed. And I think like I said, being able to attack the way that we're expecting him and seeing him doing that, and then tracking back with that elite pace, it's going to probably give him a good chance to really take his position and get used to it. Because Jeff asked if, I mean, I don't know if I would even say that Buchanan's best performances for Canada has come as a right wing, but I think for his career, I think a right wing back role would be perfect. I think Inter would be the perfect fit. There's a few other clubs out there that obviously play in this system, but I just think moving to Italy, playing this system, knowing that they've got a track record of successful wingbacks, I think it's the perfect type of move, and I think it could really help boost his game. But and then go ahead.
It's the winger one's interesting though, just because it feels like certainly among the top leagues, like the winger, as wild as it sounds, is not fully going the way of, say, like the number 10, but the winger isn't the same as it was 5 to 10 years ago, where everyone had wingers. They'd expect to take guys on 1v1 and do that. I think teams now are realizing that if you can get width from competent wingbacks, that allows you to have an extra striker, an extra body in midfield. And, games are being won and lost in the middle at high levels. Heck, even you look at even teams like City who have class wingers, those wingers are being asked to play such different positions. I'm thinking yesterday, just watched City Arsenal, and look at a guy like Jack Grealish. Like, he's not someone you're sitting there thinking as your traditional winger, but he was playing left wing. But because of the demands, he was having to track back every time. He was almost playing as a wing back, which is this again. You look across Europe, for every Napoli, there's 2 or 3 or more teams where the winger is becoming a bit of not a dying position. I think it's one where it's still there, but I think the winger position has changed a lot. If you're playing on the wing, you still are getting a lot of the same defensive responsibilities as a wing back. You're being asked to tuck back and make 4-5-1s off the ball, 4-4-2s, et cetera, et cetera. And there's just increasing examples of, again, sometimes a winger can purely be an on-the-ball position now, where you have guys coming in who are strikers. Like, okay, on the ball, you can be a winger, you can go out wide and do your thing, but off the ball, we need you to tuck in and help this battle, or, again, tuck back. And I think it's something where wing back, as we've seen more and more teams are going for it, it's a modern position where it can win and lose games. I think this is a great position to develop in long term, because we're only going to see more and more teams shift to using wing backs, whereas wingers, again, not going to die out completely, but I think it's going to be something where teams are realizing that if you can get width from wing backs, have those 3 center backs, you get that extra solidity, 3 in the midfield, 2 up front, or if you have 2 really good midfielders, you can go 4. You can get away with the 2 sitting underneath a 1 up front, or a 1-2, or however you want to do it. I think that's a reason why we're seeing a lot of top clubs shift to that. It's certainly on the ball. Even teams that have 4-3-3s or 4-4-2s are shifting to those sorts of models on the ball. So there's a lot of benefit for Buchanan continuing to develop as a wingback.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm going to just go here quickly through 2 of your questions, but I think the Italian football can help Tajon build, clearly his defensive side of the game, and maybe just awareness, like Alex was talking about as well, knowing when to make those runs, just kind of adjusting to life with, just got a message. Okay, sorry. Armin messaged me, wants me to put on something, but yeah, that's basic. I just think playing in this style will help him with the defensive side of the things that you'd expect it would, as well as the awareness, knowing when to go forward, knowing when to drop back, and then taking a look at. And I wouldn't say when he's played as a winger for Canada, he's done well, but I think he's played. Alex, correct me if I'm not remembering it correctly. I think Tajon's probably played just as many games as a wingback as he has a winger, and in John Herman's system, sometimes it's even hard to know what exactly you're playing. But when I pictured Tajon's best performance, I think it came when they played Mexico in that semifinal, and he played basically as a cam second striker, when he just basically took on the game. And so, I guess you could count, he was all over the pitch. I don't know, where would you say that for Canada, because I don't know, I picture the wing back position as kind of where, you can see Tajon as a striker.
He's kind of had good games, and I agree with Jeff in the sense that some of his memorable standout games have been higher up the field. I think, again, Mexico, he was kind of in a more free role because he was new to Canada. That was only his 5th or 6th cap, I think, as well. He torched El Salvador in the fall, and I was playing higher up. It was him, Jonathan David. They kind of had a bit of fun together. It was a bit of an interesting partnership, but also there's other games. I think Canada-US at the donut box, he was playing as a fullback. So he was kind of had to deal with Serginho Dest. If I'm not mistaken, I remember I thought he had a pretty good game. I could be misremembering. I thought he held his own there at fullback, and then Wade to at San Pedro Sula. That one was just more of a wide player because they were playing like a 4-4-2. So he was kind of just everywhere on the touchline. So he's kind of had good performances all over the park, which again, I guess kind of shows to his versatility.
Yeah, and that's, no question about it that he's had good performances for Canada all over the pitch. But I wouldn't take away that fact that, because I've seen this a little bit on Twitter as well. People saying like he's a winger, he's an out and out winger, and I don't know if I'd fully agree with that. I think that he could be molded into a pretty successful wing back. But I do want to go up to this question here. I hope that he will participate in the Nations League and Gold Cup this summer. It is important for Canada to win a title. I agree, and I'm really stuck. If you guys haven't seen the interview with John Herman, it's on the OneSoccer YouTube channel. Go check it out. I just did a video kind of even dissecting it a little bit more because I thought what John Herman said was very interesting. But I do agree. I mean, Alex, I think you do too. It is time for Canada to find a little bit of glory that way. So if you're picturing, though, a player's career and something like a move to Inter or David going to the Prem or whatever it is, those are very important to a player's career. And maybe a Gold Cup that comes around like this, and it's a full tournament, you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe that's not the highest priority of this summer, but a Nations League 2 match and you win a silverware is. And I think that's like, I don't know. I have a feeling that we're going to see, no matter what, our strongest side for the Nations League, because it is 2 matches. You win a semifinal where we got a kinder draw, and all of a sudden we're in the finals and fighting for our first trophy since the 2000 Gold Cup. And then there's the Gold Cup. And if some players, especially if they win that, Alex, like if do you think if Canada wins that Nations League, it would maybe even push players to maybe, all right, we just won. Now it's maybe time to focus on that move, focus on the rest. Maybe does the Gold Cup become less important if Canada win that Nations League, or does it become more important?
I mean, it's something where, look, I think Nations League, you get your strongest lineup. It's in June. I think it's something where if you're looking at proper off seasons, most European players are going to have to report their clubs in July. So Nations League ends middle June, at least gives you a few weeks off before you head to your clubs, focus on the year. Gold Cup, I think it's something where, certainly if you win Nations League, there might be a few players who are on the fence. I think of a guy like Atiba Hutchinson, if they go out and win Nations League, who knows, maybe he'll stick around at Gold Cup because he's invigorated by it, but he also almost kind of hints, he's like, I want to win a trophy, and you can kind of picture in his head as soon as he lifts the trophy, the cigar in the mouth moment, like, I'm done, like I've run my race, let's call it. As for the Gold Cup, I think there's also something that we're kind of forgetting in here, why again I think this Gold Cup could end up not falling to the wayside, but again, just some of the bigger guys and just anyone who's maybe on the making a big move, etc. So there's a Copa America next year. And I think that's something where if you're Canada, this Gold Cup, you go all out for this Gold Cup, you could risk maybe getting some guys off to a bad start again because they missed their preseasons or they pick up a knock at the Gold Cup. And, I'm not saying you want that ever, but say next year was just an empty summer, of course you want them to do well at the club level, but you're not sitting there thinking like, ooh, we have a Copa America to start to plan for next year. Whereas you want Canada's best squad, one that, could majoritarily compose the 2026 squad, be there to Copa America, because these are the tests they need, playing top teams in a top environment. And that's something where it's like, you want them to make the big moves that they can be at, that they need to be at. You want them to have preseason with their club so they win spots, so they're in top form by the time next summer rolls around. And if anything, the 2025 Gold Cup is going to be key, because that's all there's going to, there might be a Nations League, but that 2025 Gold Cup, it's going to be bigger because they want it to be a test event. Their teams might be, going more all out for that. And I think it's something where just the 2023 Gold Cup, it kind of falls in the middle of all this big stuff. Like a World Cup just happened. Nations League is about to happen. There's a Copa America next year. And this 2023 Gold Cup's almost just badly placed, just jammed in there. Like, oh yeah, play this, by the way. And I think just because of that, it's something where you also have to think ahead to that Copa America and having, just little things, again, because you want JD playing at a top club next summer for that. You want Buchanan making that move. You want Johnston being fully embedded in at Celtic and, a champion playing in the Champions League, etc. So I think that is a factor to consider.
Absolutely. And just DJ, if you guys haven't seen that video on OneSoccer, I talked about John Herdman's comments, but then I also talked about players who could maybe step up these tournaments, and maybe that more so talking about the Gold Cup if like a David Buchanan, Davies aren't available to feature. And I just think it's fine. I won't spoil it, but yeah, I mean, I do highlight Richie Atakubi in there. But I think the next important question, Alex, is to take a look at the price tag of Tajon Buchanan, 15 million euros. Now, for Inter, like I said, I mean, bargain hunters that they are, trying to replace Dumfries, who maybe will go for 40 or so. It looks like a really good deal. It would fall under Alphonso Davies, third for the all-time Canadian transfers. Jonathan David has the record right now, 39 million. Davies at 20, and then it would go Buchanan at 15. What are your thoughts around that? Did Buchanan do enough to potentially earn a higher one? Did Club Bruges do a good enough job? Because they originally bought Buchanan for 10. I'm not sure with all the extra bonus and stuff what the final turned out to be, but is the 15 million euro transfer a good figure for you?
I'd say ultimately yes. I think it's something based on what's there. I think it's fair just because he's played in more of a defensive position. The goals and assists haven't necessarily been there. Not saying goals and assists determines or should determine what a price tag is, but I just think, they people might see wide player played on the wing, played wing back. They'll look at stuff like that. And I think also, you just look at how Bruges has kind of fallen off this year. They're going to kind of, teams may look like Bruges is barely in a title race. Why, how can you justify paying X amount of million for a guy like Buchanan? So I think it's something where I think 15 million is fair in this economy, but also I think it's something where you look at Bruges and be like, they certainly, again, if they were wanting to sell a player like him for a lot of money, again, I just think back to that form in January. We had a couple assists in a couple of games, was winning penalties. I'm like, wouldn't you not want to keep showcasing them in there so he maybe gets some goals, gets his price tag up? But no, I think ultimately 15 is fair, just given where he's at, how long he's been there. Plus, he has 2 years left on his contract. Like, it's not like he's in some huge long-term situation where you need to buy him out. Like, 2 years left, everything. I think 15 million is fair. It feels a bit low for sure. And I think he's someone where he, in the right situation, he could certainly be a 25, 30 mil player. But I think you look at all the factors, 15 is very fair at this moment.
I would say so too. Like I said, I mean, Buchanan has been good at Club Bruges, and I think the reason that I think him maybe adjusting to a wingback role would be a good thing is because, like I said, the final product hasn't quite been there for Tajon, but there's no getting around the fact that he's an engine. He's broken into 5 different managers' squads. He's played in several different positions. This is a player who could really do a part, and I think that Inter's maybe seeing what we're seeing as well and saying, like, this right wing back position, this player's attributes could be a perfect match. We're going to take a bit of a risk. I mean, when Antonio Conte left, they brought in Inzaghi. I think you could argue, like in terms of quality, a little step down. Lukaku to Dzeko, Hakimi to Dumfries. Inter banks on these maybe little gems that can maybe come into his side and do a part. And I think that's what they're seeing here. And for 15 million euros, I think Club Brugge will be happy with that. They need to figure out like a manager to actually stay long term, different players to have as well. But let's see what Armin says. Isn't 15 million also kind of a massive bargain for starting right wing back at a top club though? I mean, I think it's definitely a bargain, especially if you get 40 million for Dumfries. Like those are the type of moves that keep a club like Inter, financially stable. they got themselves into the situation, but these type of moves where they can shift out a big name like Lukaku and replace him with an Dzeko, a completely different type of player. It was more than that, wasn't it, Alex? It was like 120 million they got for him. And then for
Lukaku, they got like 120
and they replaced him for Dzeko for free. I mean, I know there's different positions, but they've done it in the past before as well with I don't know what that Denzel was brought in for. I thought it was about 15, and then Hakimi was sold for 60. So 15 million for the attributes of a player who can play in the right wing back role is a bargain. But again, I don't know if Buchanan did enough during his time at Club Brugge to justify even more than that. I thought personally, because what he did with Canada as well, and I picture him as a wing back that maybe the 20 mil kind of mark would have been a little bit more. But Club Brugge are going to make money. I think Inter think they found themselves a good deal, and it gives them a little bit of leeway to hopefully get as much as they can for Denzel Dumfries and put them in a pretty good position going forward. But then, yes, you see Chelsea paying 60 million for Marc Cucurella.
Yeah, well, I'm looking a bit now at some Serie A transfers, and yeah, I mean, we can't use the Prem as as a comparison because they
No.
just throw around money for fun. It's like, okay, you get 50 million, you get 80 million, you get 30 million. I'm looking last year in Serie A, like Charles de Ketelaere, who's a good comparison just because he was at Bruges and he scored a lot of goals, so his price tag was naturally going to be higher. He still only went for 32 million euros. That's not a terrible amount for a guy who scored a fair amount of goals and was kind of like a piece that was very vaunted by AC Milan. He went for 32 million, so that's a comparison, even though different positions. I'm just looking through some of what was paid. Another one that stood out to me was Min Jae Kim, because I thought he was very highly rated at Fenerbahce. Napoli, I mean, again, this is just credit to Napoli. They swooped him up for 18 million. Of course, it's a center back, but I think again, the profile Min Jae Kim, like when Koulibaly left Napoli, like everyone's like, oh, Min Jae Kim's gonna go to like Napoli, and even he went for around 18 million. I mean, you can't use him as a comparison, but Kvaratskhelia went for 11 million. That was just a steal.
Yeah.
But again, that's just kind of shows maybe a winger, wide player in a different league going for that sort of price tag. I mean, Juventus paid 40 million for Chiesa and 40 million for Bremer. I think the fact that Chiesa went for 40 million, he's easily someone that if he was playing in the Premier League could have been a 60, 70, 80 million dollar player. I'm just looking like these Serie A teams didn't really spend like a whole lot of money. So I think again, 15 millions maybe based on some of those comparisons, 20 million would be fair for Buchanan. But again, I think 15 again it's fair the way you look at some of those.
I do, and like I said, I really enjoyed what Inter has done in the past few years because, like I said, I keep stressing this, and I mentioned it a bunch throughout the stream, but it is not easy to have a winning squad like that, a winning culture, and then sell your best players and then replace them with a nothing budget and then find success. So that's what makes me feel good is that there is a history of players who've come through Inter, who've done that kind of thing, and I think that Tajon coming here would probably find success. I truthfully think that. I mean, there's a little uncertainty with the future. I can't speak to the manager who will be there or what's going to obviously happen in the system in this, but just again, you just go on history and Alex and I are trying to do, figure out what they're going to be playing in. I really like this move. And I think actually I know a player who's at a league like in Belgium, at a club like Club Brugge, when Inter Milan comes calling, you're gonna back yourself. What has Tajon done recently but see his stock rise, coming up through and playing for the Canadian national team, going to a World Cup, going from New England to Europe, playing in the Champions League? This is the natural step. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something where, again, it feels soon, but the opportunity's there, the fit's there. We've mentioned all those. Again, it's a good move. Like Inter's buying him low. I think it's something too where I think, of course, we'd love to see Buchanan go for 30, 40, 50 million. That's always great to see Canadians moving for big sums. But also, again, it's something where it's not a bad thing that it's not a bad thing for Canadian players if they continue to remain undervalued. I say that just because that leads to more sneaky transfers. That leads to more, teams taking the shrewd teams taking in these Canadians, and then that'll pay. I think again, like Alistair Johnston going for 5 mil to Celtic. That's a deal where they're probably sitting going like, oh yeah, or even like Ismail Kone to Watford for 12 million. I think it's something where sometimes those cheaper shrewd moves. Yeah, it's of course you want your players to be moving for 80, 100 million, but sometimes those sorts of price tags create expectations, and that's even for top players. Think a guy like Felipe Coutinho, like one of my favorite and best players to watch. He went for too much money to Barcelona, and it was too much of a demand for him to live up to. You'd rather your guys just making moves that fit. And the price tag can almost be irrelevant. And with Buchanan, it fits, and that's what you want, because at least there's a path for him to go and shine and Inter. And I think that's ultimately what's going to be best for Canada long term. Doesn't really matter if it's 30, if it's 40. Having a guy like Buchanan play for Inter, that's only going to pay off. And I think it's something where if it continues to pay off that Canadian market, then it's going to only inflate, and it's going to pay off down the road.
I 100% agree, and I just hope next season, like I said, maybe Davies, if he's still at Bayern, JD, maybe in the Premier League. We'd love to see Canadian thrive in the Premier League, join a big club there. Buchanan playing in Serie A with Inter. I mean, it's a good time to be a Canadian soccer fan. There's no question about it. But that is going to bring us to the end of the stream today, guys. It's always exciting to wake up with some Canadian men's national team transfer, especially when Fabrizio Romano, just tosses out there. There's something there. We'll have to wait and see. We'll track it as always. There's a nice story on this over on OneSoccer, so if you want to check out that article there. I did the video that's pretty related-ish to it, so if you want to check that on the OneSoccer YouTube channel. And if you enjoyed the stream, guys, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we will see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.